the end of the day, the sirens were for the mistress who was framed for the murder of the husband who killed the wife of the friend who's the actual storyteller. Like, it's a wild story when you actually start to think about how we
Oh.
get to the end.
I love that we went from fairy tales to murder mystery.
You are listening to AP Taylor Swift, the podcast for Swifties who are all about the lyrics. We're your hosts. I'm Jen.
I'm Muncie.
And I'm Jody.
And we are your unofficial professors of Taylor Swift.
Welcome back to another episode of AP Taylor Swift. Today we have a show and tell episode for you on narratology, narrative structure. Jen, this is all you. What is narratology?
Well, as a reminder, we actually briefly touched on this in our All Too Well episode where we did the 3 different theories for the 10-minute version. I did narratology, so this feels familiar, or if you want more of this, All Too Well 10-minute version, that episode, definitely recommend checking that out. But at a high level, narratology is a long word that basically just means the structure, the format of a story. So it's studying how stories are told, plot, characters, perspective, time, all of those things. How are those things pieced together to create a moment, to create an emotion, to build tension? So, one example I wanted to highlight is a flashback. Flashbacks are a really great way to build tension. And I was thinking of the White Lotus TV series because the White Lotus almost always, well, there's 3 seasons. It starts with someone dying and you know someone dies, and then it flashbacks a week before and you get introduced to a bunch of characters. So this flashback element creates tension because you think, okay, I know point A happens and point B happens, and now the structure of the story is telling me how we get from A to B. So it builds this tension, it builds this narrative of, well, is it this? Your brain's always guessing what's going to happen. And I actually think All Too Well is a good example of that. If we want to go Taylor Swift, we start out with her walking in the house. It's, it feels like home somehow, but then we get to the chorus pretty quickly of like, hey, this fell apart. So we know it started like feeling home, but now they're no longer talking. And so then the rest of the song, you're like, well, how did we get there? And we kind of bounce back and forth and it builds that tension. So that's an example of narratology. So how are we using the structure, the way we're telling the story to create some sort of result in the listenership, the readership, the viewership, whatever it may be. So there's a lot of them. A couple of other examples would be stream of consciousness. Shout out to Mrs. Dalloway by
My
Virginia Woolf.
favorite.
I know we've gone more than like 4 episodes without mentioning that.
It's a shame. It's a damn shame.
It
It's
is.
about time.
Stream of consciousness is trying to capture how humans think. We don't think in flashback. We don't think in a chronological plot type of way. We have very weird brains. The stream of consciousness tries to capture that. And I also think I would pitch that This Is Me Trying by Taylor Swift is also sort of stream of consciousness. It's a messy song. It kind of bounces around, but that song is all about being in a bad mental place and really struggling. And the fact that it's stream of consciousness adds to that emotion. It evokes that sense of unsteadiness, of being inside a human's brain. If you think of This Is Me Trying, there are some plot points, but if you went back to that song and you rewrote it as an A, B, C, D, E linear plot, it would have a very different feeling than being a stream of consciousness. And another one, this is a really popular one. We do have a Taylor Swift example for it, but I personally love this narrative structure, epistolary. So when it's in the form of letters being written back and forth, I've seen some really fun ones in the modern day that are that, but it's like emails or work chats. It's like a modern version of that, which I think is really fun. Literature, Dracula by Bram Stoker is one of the most famous examples of that. But Taylor Swift actually wrote Dear John, which is referring to this trope of letter writing to tell stories. So all of those we can have Taylor examples, we can have other examples, but every single one of those examples, if you flipped any of those structures, it would fundamentally change everything that's happening. So that's the fun and the joy of narratology, is you're just really looking at these big structures and asking yourself why, which is a fun thing to explore.
We did Tim McGraw recently, and I
Mhm.
remember There's that moment at the end where she leaves the letter at the doorstep, and throughout the analysis, we were trying to analyze, when did she write the letter? Is it the same letter? Is it a new letter? And then she leaves the letter at the end, and then we're like, the letter has a song, and then we just sang the song, and we're stuck in a loop.
Jeremy Bearimy.
It's kind of like our song too, because our
Yeah.
song does that.
Is every song on that album?
Yeah, her country songs.
Is Taylor
maybe.
Swift Bram Stoker? Is that what you're saying right now? Oh my gosh.
Okay, well, I have the first song today for Narratology, and I have one of my absolute favorite songs in the Taylor Swift discography. Is It Over Now? It's from 1989 from The Vault. It's a Vault track from Taylor's version. Came out in 2023, written by Jack Antonoff and Taylor Swift. Is it over now? Is a rhetorical question, but more than that, it is actually a scintillating tale told through a really fascinating narrative structure. I was excited, Jen, that you mentioned flashbacks and how that is a pretty key device in storytelling. But this does kind of the opposite in some ways. We're still manipulating time in this song, but rather than simply flashing back, which there are some flashbacks, and I'll talk about it in a second, there's also the fast forward to a number of things, but you can fast forward to 300 takeout coffees later, to 300 awkward blind dates later, whatever it may be. Not only are we going back in time, we move from back in time to forward in time. And it all culminates together with the final question, was it over then? And is it over now? And so that moving back and forth in time is a key part of the way that this entire story comes to life and comes out in the way that she's written the song. So I was tipped off that this would be a really fun story right when I heard the first line. The line opens with, once the flight had flown. Maybe it's because we were discussing storytelling, but my immediate thought was just, once upon a time, once something happens. What a classic opening to a story. And in this case, she said, once the flight had flown. What I love about this first stanza is that it is so vague. You have no idea what the heck she's talking about. Once a flight had flown, with the wilt of a rose, I slept all alone, you still wouldn't go. Ultimately, it is just time passing. And so right off the bat, in a story, in a novel, or in any kind of movie, you start with a setting. You're trying to set the stage. Once upon a time serves a purpose. And here she's kind of doing the exact same thing. She's setting the stage with some things that illustrate the passage of time. Somebody had left, the flight had flown, the rose has wilted, things have died, and I'm all alone, you still wouldn't go. And then that's when we take the fast forward. That happened at a moment in time, point A, fast forward to 300 takeout coffees later. Stuff happens. And then we actually go back in time into past tense when she starts asking a bunch of rhetorical questions in the chorus. Was it over when she laid down on your couch? Was it over when he unbuttoned my blouse? Come here, whisper in your ear, dream as you passed out, baby. Was it over then? And is it over now? With that tense change, she brings us back into the present. I would love to make a beautiful painting of this back and forth in time, but this is a structure that repeats itself over and over again throughout the song. And so she's really building a narrative here by transporting the reader through time through these lyrics.
I'm about to make a nerdy reference, so
Welcome to the podcast.
strong brand start for me. I really like what you said. I've never thought about the opening to this song really, other than just like, it's beautiful. Flight had flown is a fun phonetic alliteration
Alliteration.
in there. But it reminds me a little bit as you're talking about it. Yes, we fast forward and we have the present, but one of the things that I've seen a lot of people talk about is in Lord of the Rings. One of the world building things that Tolkien did was the characters are constantly surrounded by these remnants of great civilizations long past, of reminders of how these beautiful, wonderful things that are long, long gone. Think of the mines of Moria, if I'm going to be very specific. It's these big, beautiful mines that used to be full of people and life, and now it's empty. And there's something particularly sad about, wow, this was once great, and now that all that's left of this greatness is this emptiness.
Yeah.
And the idea of a flight that's gone, a rose that's wilted, it's these physical reminders of something that once was beautiful, but because of time, because of perhaps other things that beauty is gone, and it does play with time, and it sets this narrative structure in a before and after, but then
Yes.
she plays with it and says, "And then let's fast forward." So we have a really interesting, like, a mural of time and what's changing and what's not changing, which is really cool.
Yeah, there's multiple dimensions. There's
Mhm.
layers even within the timing. It's like something that happened in the past, but then you have this moment of flight had flown, Rose had wilted, and then you fast forward even from there and leap further ahead. Then you go back in time, and then you are almost navigating that entire space between the fast forward and between the going back and questioning, was it over then and is it over now? And she takes you, this song, it really covers that whole spectrum. And the fact that it's able to just take the listener through each of those points, it's like you're weaving in and out of a story. Or the story is weaving in and out of time.
She's also really pulling in a lot of references to, in my mind, to fairy tales. Starts with once the flight has flown, that once upon a time, the wilt of the rose, I think of Beauty and the
Beauty and the
Beast.
Beast, yeah.
She laid down on your couch and slept all alone, I think Sleeping Beauty.
Hmm.
There was red blood, white snow, I think of Alice in Wonderland.
Or Snow White.
Or Snow White, yeah. So red blood, painting the roses red, Snow White, white snow. Oh, that's even better, white snow. So I just find that really interesting and something I never really recognized until we're talking about narratology and storytelling. And when I think of storytelling, I think of fairy tales because that's often some of the first stories that you really are told or remember.
I love that you said even the searching every maiden's
That's
bed
what I
for
was
something
Maiden's
just
Bed,
gonna
yeah,
say,
sorry. I
yeah.
thought about that but didn't say it. Yes, so that's really what brings it home, right? And what's really interesting about that is when I think about these fairy tales in particular, these are folk tales. These are old stories, these that have been passed down for hundreds of years. But the idea of fast forwarding to me feels very modern. It feels like I don't know if you could fast forward on something before there was a tape deck or a VCR. And so this blending of this very old traditional storytelling with this very modern way of consuming stories by fast forwarding through the parts that you just don't want to deal with.
Also, fast forwarding, as modern as it is also a little antiquated. It's
Oh,
she's an
I should
89, 90s
VCR.
baby, and yeah, I'm just saying that there was a moment in time, you mentioned the Disney princesses, and I think a lot of these Disney princess stories were consumed on VHS.
Mhm.
Yes,
For example, right? So
confirmed.
there's something there about fast forwarding to the happily ever after, maybe, or to
Mhm.
whatever's
Mhm.
supposed to happen at the end. You want to see how it turns out. And we're saying, was it over then? Is it over now? And what does it really mean to that you're looking for that answer? You're looking to see when it was over. What does that really mean and why? You're really going on this journey where you're searching for this answer. It's like detective work through time.
Well, in the way she continues to play with time, I think in the chorus of "Was it over when she lay down on your couch? Was it over when he unbuttoned my blouse?" Instead of saying, "Hey, over the last few months, you've slept with people, I've slept with people. Is it over now?" She's taking these flashes of, "Hey, over time, this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened." And we don't know the order. We don't know if the order she sings it in is that she laid down on your couch before he unbuttoned my blouse, but we
Yeah.
don't really know. That's not clear. And I don't think it's supposed to be clear because I don't think this is a chronological
No,
story. And I
not at
think
all.
I would argue that that in some ways the value of the narrative structure here is we don't know, and I don't think she knows either, which is why she's in fact asking, is it over now? The lack of in some ways, the lack of structure, the structure of the song is there is no structure, creates the confusion that she is in fact singing about.
She
Exactly.
has written a love song from the perspective of Doctor Who.
Okay, so he's actually the doctor, the show's Doctor Who. So can you get it right next time? Thank
Excuse me,
you.
I'm sorry. I've only watched a couple of episodes, but I know enough to know that they travel through time and space and have no concept of where they are in time
Yes.
and space in the universe, and that is where we are with this song. She was inspired by the show Doctor Who.
There you go.
She's in the TARDIS.
I also love the
You thought you were dorky, Jen?
Oh, my something blue at my wedding was a TARDIS keychain that was wrapped around my bouquet. So come at me.
I might join you, Jody, in watching Doctor Who because I've never watched it before and I've been wanting to.
It's really good, but go on the internet and ask the internet like where you should start because there's
Right.
just so many seasons. And listen, everybody has different perspectives of which doctors they like better and whatnot.
I'm gonna start with the Barty Crouch one.
Yes.
Yeah.
David Tennant.
Another one you would really like is the Van Gogh episode. I think you'd like the Vincent Van Gogh episode quite a bit. It's very good. Very
Tune into
moving.
our next podcast series on Doctor Who.
One thing I did want to say is one other element of storytelling that I think she uses very beautifully in this is the but no. The asking the question and then giving the answer that kind of leaves you on a cliffhanger. The song does have the line about I think about jumping off a very tall something just to see you come running. There's this catch and release or like build up and relief kind of dynamic that you often have in storytelling where you're like building up to a climax and then there's a resolution. Here it feels like you get like build up, and then there's a drop. It's like a cliff. You're not really getting, you're not really getting that resolution. Instead of getting the proper resolution, you're getting but no, you know, you expect that there would be some sort of a particular ending and instead you're denied that and it just says but no and it moves on. In terms of we were just talking about fast forwarding to the end, the happily ever after, here you're not getting to that ending. Even though you fast forward and you're expecting to see something, you don't actually get it and it just stops. And so she's using something that people expect, something, a pattern in narratology maybe that you are accustomed to, and by manipulating that and changing it, she's actually able to, I think, create a lot more impact.
Yeah, I think about jumping off of very tall somethings also makes me think of the plot device of dream or fantasy, where particularly in a film or a TV show, you may see a whole sequence and then they wake up. And it never really happened, but it reveals a deep desire or a subconscious thing that's going on with that character. If you were to make this into a visual thing, I would almost imagine like a fantasy of jumping off of very tall somethings, but then her waking up or her just being at a table having just been dreaming about this like weird reunion, very, very dark situation that she's dreaming about. It's not literal, but it has that dream sequence feeling to it.
A dream that you think is real and it turns out it's not.
It's like in Twilight in the movie when they had them actually kill all of the Cullens in the final battle, but then they cut away and that didn't actually happen.
I had a dream like that. Not like that, but like one of these I thought it was real and then it really wasn't. We could cut this out. It's semi-relevant because it's about Betty Blanco and Selena Gomez.
Oh gosh, what?
I dreamed that he was hitting on me and he was like, and I was like, no, you're engaged to Selena Gomez. We're not doing this. And he was like, so lovely. And I was like, this is not happening. You are engaged to Selena Gomez. And then I woke up and I was like, is Betty Blanco the man of my dreams? Is that what I just learned from my subconscious?
I thought you were going to go down the path of like, if you ever are dreaming and you have to go pee, never go to the bathroom in your dream. That kind of reality thing, but you went in a different direction.
Totally went to Betty Blanco as the man of my dreams.
Sorry, that would have been my second guess, so I was close.
Yeah.
I'm dead.
Anyway, other than the dream sequence, I think what she really perverts the narrative structure that you expect in a fairy tale. She has these fairy tale and these storytelling references and metaphors, and there's a very clear payoff at the end of a fairy tale where you get the prince, you have the love story, and she really after. You get your happily ever after. Here she references fairy tales and those storytelling devices, perverts the narrative, makes it go back and forth and kind of shakes it up, and doesn't get her happily ever after. And I just think that is so smart.
I just realized the last thing that you see at a fairy tale is not happily ever after. It says the end. And the whole point of the song is it over? Was it over then?
Oh, yeah.
And is it over now? There's no end.
This girl's a genius.
It's not over. The answer is it's not over, Taylor.
She's a genius.
I love this song.
In case we didn't already think that.
Okay. Well.
Vibe shift.
Still aggressive, just in a different direction. I am going to be talking about No Body, No Crime, which is from Evermore. It came out in 2020, written by Taylor Swift, and it's track 6. So, high level, No Body, No Crime is much more story driven than Is It Over Now? And by that, I mean we have multiple characters, we have plot, we have action, and we kind of know what's happening. But it is still a pretty interesting structure. A couple of things. First of all, it's a first person limited narrator. What does that like mean and how does it create meaning? So the example I always like to use is think Harry Potter. Harry Potter, bless his soul, is knows nothing throughout any of the books. And because we
guy.
are in Harry
Literally
Potter's
nothing.
brain, we know what he knows, which is an incredibly little amount, which is why Harry Potter fan fiction is a free world, because almost anything can be true about the Wizarding World,
We
because Harry
know a
knows.
little bit more than him because there were moments where I was like, come on,
Yes.
Harry. Come on.
Yeah. With our adult reasoning, we were like, no, teenage boy. No, but when we're going through the story of Harry Potter and everyone's like, oh, well, there's Voldemort. And he's like, who's Voldemort? Like, we don't know because he doesn't know. So
Yeah.
that's what first person narrator means, is we only know what the narrator knows. So
And
for
when
this
he's like,
story,
Snape did, we're like, damn it, Snape.
yeah, we're like, he is obviously right. So with that in this story, functionally, the story is, hey, the first person narrator has a friend named Esty who's like, I think my husband's cheating on me. I'm going to say something to him. She disappears. So the narrator is like, obviously the husband did it. And then she kills the husband. The narrator kills the husband. I don't think there's any reason. It's not like a wildly unreliable narrator, but it is still important that we're seeing it through the narrator's point of view. We're not seeing it through Esty's point of view. We're not seeing it through the husbands. We're not seeing it through the mistresses. We are seeing it through her point of view. So that is the foundation for the story. The other thing I wanted to point out, there's kind of foreshadowing happening, which I think is fun in that you could do this in a movie, but the way it's done in a song is so cool. It starts out with sirens and the lines, he did it, he did it. So there's foreshadowing of something's going to involve police sirens being on. So something's going to happen. So in the same way, it's kind of like what I said with the flashback, where you hear the sirens, and so then you go through the rest of the narrative, and you're like, well, why were there sirens? Like, why were there sirens? You keep asking that question because it starts out of, oh, her husband's cheating, not great, not going to be police siren worthy. So that tension builds of like, okay, and then we get to the chorus of, I think he did it, but I just can't prove it. And in that version of the chorus, you're thinking he cheated. I just can't prove he cheated. That's what it is. And then we get to the next verse. Esty's missing. He reports his missing wife. His truck has new tires. His mistress moved in. Somebody's got to catch him out. I think he did it, but just can't prove it. Is, I think he killed her, but I just can't prove it. And at that point, we still don't have police sirens of no one is suspecting this. So why are there police sirens? And then, as always, we get to the bridge. So we have that build up to the climax. The bridge is the climax. Good thing my daddy made me get a boating license. I cleaned enough houses to know how to cover up a scene, obviously implying a crime scene. Esty's sister's going to swear she was with me, and the mistress took out a life insurance policy. And then they think she did it, but they just can't prove it. So now at the very end, we get the police and we get that resolution of that's why they were sirens. They think that that the mistress did it. So even throughout this, you start thinking like, is the eye gonna get caught? Like, what is the husband gonna get caught? What's gonna happen? And the resolution is that very classic kind of murder mystery, but something's being pulled out, the rug's being pulled out from under your feet of, nope, at the end of the day, the sirens were for the mistress who was framed for the murder of the husband who killed the wife of the friend who's the actual storyteller. Like, it's a wild story when you actually start to think about how we get to the end.
I love that we went from fairy tales to murder mystery.
And that's what growing up is like as a woman in this country.
And scene.
From Disney to true crime, the millennial
To
woman.
SVU. Yeah.
One thing that I think is so interesting about this story sequence that you just laid out, Jen, is that we go from no, there ain't no doubt to I think he did it, but I just can't prove it over and over again. She could have just said, I know he did it, but I can't prove it. but she says, I think he did it. And so this gets back to the limited narrator that you were
Mhm.
talking about, is that we can only go off of what this narrator is saying. And this narrator actually oscillates between being sure, no, there ain't no doubt, to I think he did it. And that's a pretty big oscillation when you realize that he ends up dead at the end.
When you're going to murder
Murder.
him.
Right.
I
So
think
A solid 75% sure, and that's enough for me to
enough.
believe, so
it
Good enough.
adds I love the structure because it adds just the right amount of doubt and craziness. It makes you
Mhm.
question the narrator just enough to think, wait, am I listening to a psychopath? So at the end, when you realize that she is the one that ends up murdering this guy, there's no body, no crime, you kind of are like, yay, good for you, narrator, but you're also kind of like, holy crap, have I just been an accomplice in this crazy tale? You know, there you have that
Yeah.
inkling of doubt.
Yeah, well, what I like too, I was gonna point out, this is more it's less narrative structure and more of a, rhetorical practice. She does show don't tell really
Mhm.
well in this song. She doesn't say that, "Oh, my friend Esty said she's pretty sure her husband has a mistress." He says, "Her husband's acting different and it smells like infidelity.
Right.
That ain't my Merlot on his mouth. That ain't my jewelry on our joint account." In my opinion, it really adds to that limited narrator because she's not saying this is what happened. She's telling us through her experience of this is what I saw, this is what my friend told me. So this is how I'm piecing together what's happening because of these things. So she doesn't say, "Oh, and he probably killed her wife." She says, he reports the missing wife, he has new tires, and his mistress moved in immediately. Okay, it's kind of that if we're staying in this murder
It's
mystery,
not looking great for him.
yeah, it's circumstantial, it's circumstantial evidence.
Okay, it would not hold up in court.
Exactly, which is why I guess that might be why she takes it into her own hands because it wouldn't hold up in court. But the show don't tell strategy here adds to that uncertainty slash certainty of, well, we don't know for sure, but man, the evidence is piling up, but it's just
Yeah.
circumstantial, but this is just what she knows. So we don't know what the fingerprint said, what was there, anything like that. It's just what she knows and she pieces it together.
Yeah, and she even then it feels like she's not totally sure because she has this moment where she's like, no body, no crime. I ain't letting up till the day I died. The way the music is she's saying no, no in the back. And then she says, I think he did it. And then she
Yeah.
says, no, no, he did it. So it's almost like a little bit
Yeah.
of convincing herself
Yes.
throughout the song as well. And you have to remember that her friend just died
Yeah.
or disappeared, which is crazy. I mean, this song is dark.
It is.
But all of the characters in here have that same doubt, right? The Esty has that doubt. No, no,
Yes.
I think he did it. No, no, he did it. The narrator has that same thing. I think he did it. No, no, I think he did it. There's this a self doubt, right? There seems to be this mix of I have this evidence, this that I have seen with my own eyes of the Merlot or the truck tires and his mistress moving in. Is that enough? And it's to your point, Jen, like it's circumstantial in wouldn't hold up in court, but it's enough in my bones. It's enough for
Yeah.
me to trust myself and trust my gut.
The way you said that made me think of the song "It's Time to Go" of when it's time to go,
In your
when it's
bones.
time to murder your dead friend's cheating husband.
And
You
frame his
know.
It's
mistress.
on the same
Yeah.
album.
Don't forget
Yeah,
that
it is the
he
same
framed
Same
his
album.
album.
It
mistress.
is
You know when it's
Evermore.
time for him to go.
Well, and the uncertainty does translate though of the cops think that she, the mistress, did it. She, the mistress, thinks I did it, but she can't prove it. No one can prove anything. But because we're in the mind of this narrator, we side with her. If this song was written from the viewpoint of anyone else in the same limited first person, we might side with them. We
Yeah.
tend to side with the narrator
Narrator.
whose head we're in. That's just kind of how it works usually. Not all, sometimes eventually you get to a point where you're like, this person sucks, but you tend to believe them.
I would love a version of the song where we find out that every single one of these is wrong.
I was gonna say, is this an unreliable narrator?
It is 100% an unreliable narrator.
Yeah, I mean, and I would argue that every first person narrator
Yeah.
is unreliable to a certain extent.
I trust her though. I agree. I'm like, you go, girl.
I mean,
Yeah,
we know
you
we know
do.
she did. because she
Yes.
tells us.
She
The
tells
only thing that we
and I
know
think she's
here,
justified.
the only thing that we do know is that she's cleaned enough houses to cover up a scene and her alibi is fake. Like, she's basically told us that she did it.
It's giving, like, on TikTok when a girl is like, "I think my boyfriend is cheating, da 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 da," and then you have all of the girls in the comment being like, "We support you, we are here for you, take him
Yes.
down."
Yes. Absolutely that
That is what this
energy.
song is, and I wasn't confused and didn't think there was anything confusing about the, like, she's talking about her dead friend's ex-wife until you put it that way, then I was like, "Oh, this is actually rather complicated," but I am so there, I am so supporting her.
Just
Yeah.
like, okay, the police think she did it, but they just can't prove it. Like, that is obviously wrong,
You know who
right?
could prove it? Any of the girls on TikTok, because we are great.
But I'm just saying, like, we already know that the police are wrong. Like, what if everything else is
Yeah.
also wrong and this entire song
Esty
could
faked her
be,
death.
well,
Oh,
Etsy
yeah.
just had enough and
She
ran
just
away.
didn't wanna work at the Olive Garden anymore, and she's like, "I'm gonna fake my death to
I
get out of
think
this."
they ate at Olive Garden. I don't know if she worked at Olive
Oh.
Garden.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Tuesday night at Olive
Maybe she
Garden
just
after
didn't wanna
job ran
eat at
away.
Olive Garden anymore, and she was too embarrassed to tell her friend that she doesn't like unlimited breadsticks, and so she decided instead of having that confrontation, she faked her death.
Also, there is a subtle change here about, but I ain't letting up until the day I die. And then at the end, it says, I wasn't letting up until the day he died.
Yeah, and I think that unlike Is It Over Now, we do get some resolution here.
Finality, yeah.
There's a question mark in was this the right resolution? I don't know. But the song is I'm not letting up until the day he dies. So I'm going to kill him. And then, hey, I wasn't going to let up until the day he died. But like,
yeah.
I'm good now. I can let up
Yeah.
now, I
It's
guess.
exactly what I'm saying. Like, you're going along with it. You're there for the ride, but there's
Mhm.
just enough doubt
Mhm.
sewn in throughout the song that you are kind of still feeling icky about it at the end. Like, you're like, yeah, I love this song, but like, are we all crazy? You
It's the
have
same way
enough
you feel
doubt.
when watching, like, Dexter or something, where you're like, "I'm cheering on a
Mhm.
I am a
murderer."
child because
Yeah.
I just thought of Dexter's Laboratory.
Okay.
But yeah, it has that's what I think is so interesting about the first person narration, which maybe this transitions to your song a little bit, Jody,
Yeah.
of you're gonna typically default to believing whoever's telling the
Right.
story
Their
until something
perspective.
happens to make you truly doubt it.
I have the last song. I will be talking about You're on Your Own, Kid. This is for Midnights that came out in 2022, track 5, written by, and I just wrote TS and JA because we are on a shorthand basis at this point, Taylor Swift and Jack Antonoff. I immediately thought of this song again because of just the chronological structure of this story. And then when I actually started looking at the lyrics, I was like, there's nothing explicitly that tells you there's a chronological structure. It's just hinted at throughout the lyrics that it's told in this flashbacks and this coming of age story. So you also have it's a first person narrator that's really focusing on the narrator's internal emotional perspective and her journey and how she feels with all of these things happening to her. So it's also a Bildungsroman, which I don't think I've used that word since studying Great Expectations and Pip in like ninth grade. It's a Bildungsroman structure, coming of age. We show the protagonist's moral, psychological, and emotional growth through the challenges and setbacks. So going back very briefly to the structure of the story and then the narrative and the story we see itself. Again, I it's told in a mix of past and present tense. I always read or listened to this very clearly as a progression of time from like younger child to teenager, like getting up closer to adulthood, but certainly not reaching adulthood, even though there's nothing specific. What you hear instead is summer went away, still the yearning stays. I play it cool. You also have I Wait Patiently, we're the best of friends. So you have these scenes that evoke childhood or teenage or like younger years to me. This summer yearning, play it cool, I dream of getting out, without ever explicitly saying I was a child, which I just didn't quite realize until doing this work and following and like trying to actually review all of this song. I was just like, oh, I just assumed that that's what it was.
I think especially on social media and TikTok and with the Eras tour and everything, there's been so much projected onto the song for what all of the different lyrics
deeply
can mean,
emotional.
that I think we've all started to think about it chronologically in our own lives.
Yeah.
We did this song when we were talking about Harry Potter, and I remember thinking of this in terms of 7 books. It feels like it's following that path so perfectly that you can just transpose it honestly onto any chronology and it kind of works. So
Right.
the Bildungsroman's excellent call out.
I also really love that because the Bildungsroman also has a, I don't know how to describe this visually. It has a structure where someone, say they start at a 5
Right.
and they go up to a 10 and then they go down to a 0 and then they end up at like a 7.
Right. You level. Exactly.
And the idea is Jane Eyre's a really good example of this. So Jane Eyre starts out as an orphan, pretty mediocre, is doing fine with her life though. Maybe she's not an orphan. I don't remember. The beginning I never remember, but she becomes this tutor for Mr. Rochester, and then they fall in love and they're going to get married, and that's too high for a non-titled, no name tutor whatever to marry this rich man. That's not allowed, and so she has to fall, go very low, and then re-levels back up out and everything's okay when she discovers, oh surprise, she actually was related to people and she does have money, so now it's okay for her to marry this guy, so it's an appropriate thing. I'm just made a note, I am going to do this. I'm going to write this week's Substack about Taylor Swift's career as a Bildungsroman, because I would argue
Ooh. Oh,
1989 was the peak,
And
then we
Reputation
hit
was
and Reputation was the
absolutely.
low, and now we've hit this like pretty steady level.
Well,
That's a great
which
one.
works because this song, a lot of people feel that the song is
Yes.
autobiographical. It's about her own experiences. And the Eras tour had all of the different eras too. So we're reliving
The chapters, the
all of the
eras.
different
Yeah.
chapters. Yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I find really interesting about this song is the mix of past and present tense. So the verses, not hard and fast, but tend to be in present tense. I play it cool. I wait patiently. We're the best of friends. I hear it in your voice. But then in the pre choruses, I waited ages to see you there. You do have I searched the party. So just this mix of past and present pulling you back and forth from this point of reflection, looking back on your life, but also bringing it to life so clearly, so vividly that it feels like you're still there. I'm actively searching the party of better bodies just to learn that you never cared. So it's this really interesting tension and dynamic that I think to me evokes the way that really strong memories make you feel like you're still in that place, that you're still like you're reliving that experience all over again. That tends to happen particularly with negative emotions and really challenging parts in your life where you're like, I feel like I'm still there. I can still feel the stress and the anxiety. It doesn't feel like any time has passed, and I think that's what the tense does with this song. So we've got childhood, then the second verse, she gets a little older. I see the great escape, so long Daisy May connects back to I didn't choose this town, my dream of getting out. So she's also connecting back and referring back to things that have happened, so we can see progression in this narrative. We see growth. Something different bloomed waiting in my room. So we have that growth from waiting for someone to notice me to finding my own voice. So here's that we're getting to that point in the Bildungsroman where we're getting a little bit more on top. We also have, just this continued parallel structure in the choruses that again are always pulling you back to here's where you came from. I waited ages to I called a taxi just to learn that you never cared, just to learn that my dreams aren't rare. So I wouldn't the only thing that makes me hesitate to call this a Bildungsroman is there's not really a peak before a drop. It's she goes up a little bit that I've escaped. Something different bloomed. I'm writing, so I found a little bit of myself and my own identity as opposed to trying to compare myself in terms of how I'm valued by others. I play my songs in the parking lot. I've made it out of my head and into the world of playing music. But I search the party of better bodies just to learn that my dreams aren't rare. There's still this disappointment. The third verse isn't a verse at all, it's the bridge. Of course, it's the bridge. And this is where we get more of that past tense look back reflection on the whole journey where I gave my blood, sweat, and tears for this. You get a whole story in and of itself in the bridge. I hosted parties, I took the money, I looked around in a blood-soaked gown. This is really the climb. Sorry, now I think of
Miley
Yeah.
Miley
Cyrus, the climb.
Cyrus. Like, the bridge is really the climb. So again, that's where I think it kind of breaks that Bildungsroman structure. But to your point, like, she's not on top of the world ready to fall. She really is finding this kind of redemption, this comfort with herself and who she is, and it creates this circular structure of the whole song, right? That we've the song whole song has built to this moment of redemption that really changes the meaning of "You're on your own, kid." "You're on your own, kid" in the beginning is said from this point of loneliness. You're on your own, you're alone, to this point of pride. You're on your own, kid. Look at what you've accomplished, what you've done. You've always been on your own, and look at how far you've come. You can make it.
I actually do like that climb, even though it is a climb, it to me feels almost like a clawing up a hill kind of a thing. It's
Hmm.
like you're climbing, but you're stumbling as you're climbing. And so
Yeah.
in some ways I do kind of feel like it is that fall. It's like up, down, up, down. You're calling it circular motion, but I definitely feel that rhythm. I hosted parties, I took the money. I
Yeah.
don't think these are positive
They're not
things. It's
positive.
like I
Correct.
did this
That's a
stuff,
great
but
point.
it's like a low. I looked around in a blood-soaked gown, like, it feels like these were low points and really difficult points. So, yes, there was an upward journey, but it felt like it was coming from a low point, and it was a hard journey to claw out of, and in that sense, I make it does feel like she's in a lower point in
Yeah,
the
you
story,
only
so to
really
speak.
get everything you lose is a step you take. Like,
Exactly.
that perfectly encapsulates what you were just talking about.
Yeah.
That there's a lot of challenges, there's a lot of things that are going to push you back, but you're also gonna learn something and take a step forward and move forward.
Which is what it kinda is, because to end up back on top, you have to kinda, like you have to be, like, up, then down, and then
Yeah,
kinda
you're on
make your
your
way
own,
back
kid.
up again.
You can face this.
Yeah.
Yeah, a Bildungsroman traditionally is really used to tell a story of, hey, this is how the world should work. Tends to be a little didactic.
Mm,
A Victorian Bildungsroman, which is where the
Charles
genre
Dickens,
really
yeah.
took off. And I think, not that I think Taylor was necessarily trying to write a Bildungsroman, but I think there's some playing here happening with what is the peak. So I hosted parties and I took the money. Those would be isolated, would be external signs of success. Okay, I'm hosting a bunch of parties and I have a lot of money. But then she contrasts them at the exact same time with really big lows of I starved my body and the jokes weren't funny.
Yeah,
So it's sort of playing with this idea of here's what society would say is the peak, and I'm gonna flip and say this was my low,
right. I'm
actually.
gonna show you behind the
Yeah.
curtain. It's the Instagram versus reality.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. This is gonna be a fun Substack. My brain's going crazy. I think
It's
it's
gonna
gonna
be
be
a
really
fun Substack.
interesting.
It's gonna be a fun deep dive
It's gonna
because
be a
we are going
super
to
fun
be
deep
deep
dive.
diving this next week, which I don't know if we have more to say from a narratology perspective because I feel like I could just go into talking about this from a deep dive
No, I
perspective.
think I think you really nailed on the head with the Bildungsroman. I am
Yeah.
excited about that Substack.
The only other thing that I think is interesting structurally is you're on your own, kid is sort of the talking to herself or talking
Yes.
to her self as a
Childhood self,
child,
a little
yeah,
both.
or like her inner child. That this isn't necessarily the narrative structure, it's more the conflict, but the conflict is almost man versus self in some
Mm,
ways, of that tension that you talk about. And even what we were just talking about with the what does society think is great versus the low, I think that tension is there of her inner kid who had dreams, and then there's me as an adult talking to that kid. I think using that structure, this is person, but the you is also herself, which
correct.
we can talk
Which is
about that
why it's
more.
a track 5.
Yeah, we can talk about the you more in the deep dive, but I just think that's a really interesting narrative structure for a song that's reflecting on stages of life, on growing up and learning lessons. To be talking to your inner child is a really interesting way to present that story.
And that's probably where we'll start in the deep dive because we ask, say, who's the speaker and who are they speaking to? So, with that, join us next week right here on AP Taylor Swift as we deep dive You're on Your Own, Kid. That's all we have for you today on AP Taylor Swift. Be sure to rate and review us on your favorite podcast app. Follow us on your social channel of choice at AP Taylor Swift to stay up to date. And join us next time as we overanalyze and deep dive into the next Taylor Swift song on AP Taylor Swift.